explore it with 12 of his men. They were in need of food, and he took with him a goatskin full of very potent and mellow wine to give whoever lived there in return for hospitality. The gate in the fence was not closed, and they made their way into the cave. No one was there, but it was clearly the dwelling of some very prosperous person. Along the sides of the cave were many crowded pens of lambs and kids. Also, there were racks full of cheeses and pails brimming with milk, delightful to the sea-worn travelers who ate and drank as they waited for the master. At last he came, hideous and huge, tall as a great mountain crag. Driving his flock before him, he entered and closed the cave's mouth with a ponderous slab of stone. Then, looking around, he caught sight of the strangers and cried out in a dreadful, booming voice, "Who are you who enter unbidden the house of Polyphemus? Traders or thieving pirates?" They were terror-stricken at the sight and sound of him, but Odysseus made swift to answer, and firmly, too. "Shipwrecked warriors from Troy are we, and your suppliants, under the protection of Zeus, the suppliants' god." But Polyphemus roared out that he cared not for Zeus. He was bigger than any god and feared none of them. With that, he stretched out his mighty arms, and in each great hand he seized one of the men and dashed his brains out on the ground. Slowly, he feasted off them to the last shred, and then, satisfied, stretched himself out across the cavern and slept. He was safe from attack. No one but he could roll back the huge stone before the door, and if the horrified men had been able to summon courage and strength enough to kill him, they would have been imprisoned there forever. During that long, terrible night, Odysseus faced the awful thing that had happened and would happen to every one of them if he could not think out some way of escape. But by the time day had dawned and the flock gathering at the entrance woke the Cyclops up, no idea at all had come to him. He had to watch 2 more of his company die, for Polyphemus breakfasted as he had supped. Then he drove out his flock, moving back the big block at the door and pushing it into place again as easily as a man opens and shuts the lid to his quiver. Throughout the day, shut in the cave, Odysseus thought and thought. 4 of his men had perished hideously. Must they all go the same dreadful way? At last, a plan shaped itself in his mind. An enormous timber lay near the pens, as long and as thick as the mast of a 20-oared ship. From this, he cut off a good piece, and then he and his men sharpened it and hardened the point by turning it round and round in the fire. They had finished and hidden it by the time the Cyclops came back. There followed the same horrible feast as before. When it was over, Odysseus filled a cup with his own wine that he had brought with him and offered it to the Cyclops. He emptied it with delight and demanded more, and Odysseus poured for him until finally a drunken sleep overcame him. Then Odysseus and his men drew out the great stake from its hiding place and heated the point in the fire until it almost burst into flame. Some power from on high breathed a mad courage into them, and they drove the red-hot spike right into the Cyclops' eye. With an awful scream, he sprang up and wrenched the point out. This way and that he flung around the cavern, searching for his tormentors, but, blind as he was, they were able to slip away from him. At last, he pushed aside the stone at the entrance and sat down there, stretching his arms across, thinking thus to catch them when they tried to get away. But Odysseus had made a plan for this, too. He bade each man choose out 3 thick-fleeced rams and bind them together with strong, pliant strips of bark. Then, to wait for day, when the flock would be sent out to pasture. At last, the dawn came, and as the beasts crowding through the entrance passed out, Polyphemus felt them over to be sure no one carried a man on his back. He never thought to feel underneath. But that was where the men were, each tucked under the middle ram, holding on to the great fleece. Once out of that fearful place, they dropped to the ground and, hurrying to the ship, in no time launched it and were aboard. But Odysseus was too angry to leave in prudent silence. He sent a great shout over the water to the blind giant at the cave's mouth. "So, Cyclops, you are not quite strong enough to eat all of the puny men? You are rightly punished for what you did to those who were guests in your house." The words stung Polyphemus to the heart. Up he sprang and tore a great crag from the mountain and flung it at the ship. It came within a hair's breadth of crushing the prow, and with the backwash the boat was borne landward. The crew put all their strength into their oars and just succeeded in pulling out to sea. When Odysseus saw that they were safely away, he cried again, tauntingly, "Cyclops! Odysseus, wrecker of cities, put out your